Alrighty, good afternoon, Cicely. Thank you so much for coming back to see me. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I'm a little frustrated with myself. I didn't do super well on the homework you gave me, but I tried.
Okay. Well, first what we're gonna do is just do a mood check.
Okay.
How was your week on a scale of 1 to 10? Can you tell me,
Like,
1 being the worst and 10 being the best week ever?
probably a 4.
A 4? Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I just got in a lot of fights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
It's just a lot of the same old happening.
Okay. So I'm hearing you say that you're at a 4 and that you had a lot of fights this week. So what we're going to do really quick is just set the agenda for our session today. We've got, what we're going to do is do an update and have you talk a little bit more about your week. Then we'll review your homework. You mentioned that this week's homework wasn't very good, and then we'll talk some more about that. And then we'll work on the problems that we discussed at the beginning. Then we'll set some new homework for your next week, and then I'll get some feedback from you. Is that okay? Does that sound all right?
That sounds great.
All right. So tell me about your week.
Okay, so everything seemed to be starting fine, but then Zach, who I live with, he just got really frustrated. He wasn't doing great in his classes, and whenever he is frustrated, he makes it my fault. And he says things like he views me as an extension of himself, and that's why he can get mad at me more easily. But it's just really frustrating having someone constantly get mad at you every time they fail.
Yeah.
When it's not my fault that he isn't doing well in school, it's his own fault.
Right. So you said that he uses his frustration out on you, and that also in turn makes you frustrated?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So last week, what was the homework assignment? Can you tell me a little bit about what you did?
So last week, instead of continuing the fights with him, I was supposed to write about what was going on and how it was making me feel and how that it's really not my fault that he's having problems. But I only did that once, and all the other times that we had fights, it was pretty much the same fight about him failing classes. I just kept initiating in the fight instead of writing about it.
Okay. So was there times where you did write things down?
Just the first time.
Okay. All right. So what is something that maybe you could change or do that... Do you actually think that the homework assignment that you did was beneficial? Was that something that...
I think it was nice to write about everything so that it's a lot more clear, because when you're in the heat of it and someone is throwing their problems on you and saying it's really your fault that they're messing up, you almost start to believe it. But then when I got to the point where I was writing it down, especially, the only time I did it, it made it more logical in my brain to where I'm not forcing him to go out and drink and party, and I'm not forcing him to do anything. I'm actually trying to support him in actually doing well with his life, and it just made it easier to know that I was not the root of his problem, but he has some problems to deal with, and I need to work on myself and be strong enough in myself to where I don't allow someone who tries to attack me emotionally and let myself believe that, because it's not true.
Right. Well, it seems like you've got a good handle on what the assignment was there for you to do. You saw that by writing things down, you were able to see your side of it.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's wonderful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move into CBT. And CBT is used to help you to understand that how you react comes from a automatic thought or an emotion that you have, and therefore that is how you react. So like you already said that you see that Zach is acting out, and that is not something that is your fault. And that was what CBT is. We cannot help how other people act towards us. All we can do is how we react. So, what thoughts or images went through your mind when you had the fight? You said you wrote things down on your first fight. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what are your thoughts? What were things that happened?
I think that, obviously I have insecurities about I really want everyone to like me, and I'm very much so a people pleaser, and I think it's really hard for when someone knows that and kind of attacks that and makes you feel bad, because I do want to help him so much, and he realizes that and kind of uses it against me in some ways. But I don't really know exactly where that insecurity of wanting to please people and wanting to be liked really comes from. But it kind of opened my eyes to that when I was writing it down. And it kind of also just cleared it up to where it's like, once you know something's happening, it's easier to deal with it. Whereas before, when he would yell at me or something and say that it was my fault that he was going through this or that, I just believed it automatically, whereas when I went and wrote it down, I was able to see that, it's really not my fault, and even though I do want to be there for him and I do want to help him, there's some things that I just can't do, and I just need to learn to accept that a little bit better, because I don't always accept it.
Okay. So, your first fight, give me a picture of what that looks like.
Okay, so our first fight that happened this week, that was kind of ongoing fight, was he was doing really poorly in a class, and I was trying to help him with his papers, and he's very smart, but he's lazy, and so he wasn't really applying himself to the work, and the teacher called him out on it, as teachers do, and so he was really frustrated with that. And so instead of being frustrated and motivating it for him to work harder, he was like, oh, it's your fault that I'm not doing well in this class. And he would just make up excuses about how I distract him from school, or how I'm not helping him enough. I'm not, holding his hand as he's doing homework, and I'm not being supportive enough for him to do well. And so our arguments are kind of him yelling at me and me feeling bad, and then me getting tired of feeling bad, and then I will yell at him. And because he attacks me, I'll find something to attack him right back, and then it almost always ends with us both super angry and me walking away, and then us never resolving anything but saying sorry but not really meaning it, and then we have this same fight over and over again.
Okay. So he says things like, it's your fault, it's you're the reason why I'm not doing well.
Yes.
So when he says those things to you, what are the thoughts that you have?
It makes you feel worthless, or it makes me feel worthless. It makes me feel like I'm a bad friend, I'm a bad person, that I'm not really worth much at all to anyone, and I'm just this destructive distraction in people's lives.
Okay, and can you tell me how much you actually believe that you are worthless and that you are a distraction?
I think there's times when I really believe it, and then there's other times when I really try to just put it out of my mind and know that it's not true and it's just a lie, that it's just so easily believed by me that sometimes I believe it more than I'd like to admit.
Yeah. Okay, so on a scale of maybe 1 to 100, and you said sometimes you believe that thought and sometimes you don't, it's kind of situational,
I'd say I probably believe it like 60-40. 60% of the time I allow myself to believe it, and 40% of the time I don't.
Okay. So, your last fight that you had, what would you say that one was?
That one was like 100%. Everything he said, I just automatically believed, and it just caused just like the biggest just huge fight.
Okay. So, if your friend was in the situation that you're in, what would you tell her or him?
That they're great and that they're stupid to believe something that stupid. Because I know it's dumb, but it's hard to not. I don't know why it's so hard to not believe it.
Mm-hmm. So you tell your friend that they're silly, or like you said.
Yeah, that they're great and that they're not the root of these problems, and they need to stop believing that they are the root of these problems, because they're not doing anything to cause another person destruction.
Okay, and what advice would you give them?
Probably to separate themselves from that person. Probably to like not hang around them anymore.
Okay. So what do you think is an alternative for this, for your situation, for your fights, for I don't know how you feel about cutting them out. I haven't heard you say that at all.
No, I mean, I don't think that I'm ready to cut them out, but I do think that I need to stand up for myself in a rational, respectful way.
Okay.
Like, I want him to understand that this is the way he makes me feel, without being like, just like he does by saying, oh, you make me feel this way because you do this. Like, without him feeling attacked.
Right. So what is some way that you could do that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, because I feel like even if it's just like a sit down conversation, he's gonna get upset. Like, it's inevitable that he's gonna be upset.
All right. So at the beginning of the conversation, you said that you were out of 4. So now that we've kind of like talked through some things, and you've thought about how it would treat a friend, and where are you now?
I'm probably like a 7.
7?
It helped a lot to talk about it.
Okay. So last week we talked about writing things down, and you said that you kind of did it, and you mentioned that, oh, this is something that I see the benefits of it. Do you think this is maybe something that you would want to do the same?
I think it's something that I want to continue and get better at, and not just do it like 1 out of 5 fights, but do it like every single fight. Because I think it'll help me.
Okay. What are some other things that?
I'd like to voice my feelings to him. I'd like to somehow figure out a way to do that.
Okay.
And maybe I need to slowly start separating myself. Like, not just cut him off completely and be like, oh, you're a horrible person, so we're no longer friends. But
right.
Maybe find another outlet or something to do, or like another hobby that kind of gives us more of our own space.
All right. I think those are some really good ideas and some things that we can talk about maybe a little bit towards the end. Let's go back to your thoughts. And you mentioned that when he lashes out, that you sometimes feel worthless. And can you tell me just a little bit more about that?
I think it just makes you feel like less of a human being. Like, to cause someone so much pain, like he exaggerates it to be, just makes you feel like, well, you must be really awful if you're able to do that with not even knowing that you're doing it.
Okay. Can you think back to a time where you had a conversation with Zach and things were appropriate, I guess you would say, or where he didn't make you feel worthless?
I think in the beginning of our friendship, that's how it started out. When we first met, we got along really well. We had a ton of things in common, and everything was just more lighthearted. Everything was more fun.
Okay, so things were more lighthearted, and now as your friendship has progressed,
it's gotten like a dark cloud over it. Everything's heavy. Everything's so much more intense.
Where do you think that came from?
I think it came from him. I think he got really sad. He went through just a spout of depression and kind of renounced everything that he believed in, and I still wanted to be there for him as a friend, but we couldn't really connect on some of the things that we connected to and like we used to, and some of his hobbies just completely changed, and he turned into someone who would rather forget about his problems and use any substance that he could to forget about it. And then I couldn't connect on that with him because I don't work that way. And then I think it just slowly started going down, and the more I wanted to help him, the more he would kind of, it's weird, it's like the more I wanted to help him, the more he trusted me to help him, but then also the more he would use things like that trust to manipulate me.
Right.
And
then it just kind of cycled.
Yeah, it kept cycling down, and without realizing it, he pulled me down to his level of depression before I could even realize I was being brought down without actually helping him whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about things today. We talked about your week. We talked about how you had a couple fights, how you were able to write some things down, and how we've looked back at how it makes you feel and how sometimes you have the thoughts of being worthless, and how you sometimes believe it, that you actually don't at times, but sometimes you actually do believe that. So the homework this week, you had mentioned that journaling maybe every other time that you have a confrontation. And that you also mentioned that you would like to be able to stand up for yourself. Do you think this is something that you could do this week? Maybe we could talk about that for just a minute. How we could gauge you standing up for yourself so that you are able to feel better, and that by him lashing out at you, so that you're not able to have those thoughts of letting him get those emotions and those thoughts brought out.
Well, I think definitely by the journaling, it helps me kind of keep my emotions more in check and not lash out. So maybe like after I journal, I just say, hey Zach, I kind of, when we were fighting, you made me feel this. Or not you made me, but like I felt this way during the fight. And maybe that'll just be like a baby step, but good enough to where it doesn't start another fight, but it's also not in the heat of the moment where I'm like, so I don't accidentally say like you make me feel bad.
Right.
Because that's only going to make him feel bad.
Okay. So another thing that we need to look at too is your thoughts of how, because like I said, with CBT, it's thoughts and then it stems to your emotions. So maybe journaling too. What if you mentioned what thoughts are going through your head as well? Yeah. Is that something that?
Yeah, I think that would help a lot.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that sounds great. We're journaling about, you said every other time, so it's not overwhelming for you, because that can be a lot of journaling since he is your roommate. And then being able to voice your thoughts after you write things down.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we're wrapping up, can you give me some feedback of some things like that you would like to talk about next week?
I think next week I'd like to just, I guess, continue on this path until I'm able to have a full conversation with Zach about the way I feel. Maybe just keep working towards that ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not accepted well, then maybe working towards the possibility of more separation with us
Okay.
that wouldn't cause a fight.
Okay. So working on conversation and working on some of your maybe living spaces, like you said, separation, things like that. Okay. And then what was something that you really enjoyed about today's session?
I really enjoyed just being able to let it all out in a safe space, but then also like talking about it made me realize some things, and that's always good.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming. That is
Yes.
our time for today, and I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you were able to feel comfortable sharing and talking through some things.